I find myself in this position where I get to help people every single day in a unique way. That's so important to who I am and how I view myself in the world today, partly because of where I started. My mother was someone who was always striving for more. I mean, she was a young single mother, and I had a learning disability. It was something that she didn't understand. It impacted a lot of my behavior, my frustrations. And as I got a little older, I experienced a pretty serious trauma. And then there was the underlying thing that I certainly wouldn't have known then, that I'm a queer woman. And I definitely think that my mother was not equipped to help me with what I was going through. And she had her own challenges. So I walked around in the world feeling crazy and other and misunderstood. And there was a day that it just exploded for me. I woke up that morning and I knew I was not going to school that day. I was facing finals and I knew I was going to fail. And I got in my car and I started to drive. I was running away. And I can't remember whether I had $40 in my pocket or $80 in my pocket, but it was not enough to live on. And I ended up in Nashville. This wasn't even a city I was familiar with. But I had this really dumb idea that I could just get a motel, and I tried to get a room and I was summarily denied. You are not 18 years old, you do not have ID, and you can't stay here. And there was a phone booth that I noticed in that parking lot. And I look up and I see a sticker, and it says, if you're a teenager and you need help, call this number. And so I call, and I cried myself through the first few minutes. I couldn't say anything to this woman other than I had run away from home, I could not go back, I had no money, I didn't know where to go, and I didn't know where I was. And a moment later, she connected me to a young guy, and he talked to me and he said, I work at this local shelter, it's for teenagers. And he gives me this address, and I pull into the parking lot, and I just instantly knew I was safe with him. And what I learned was that I had arrived at Oasis Center. And he says to me, first, we have to call your mom. And I said, she's going to make me come home. And if I go home, I don't know if I'm gonna make it. And he said, the law lets you be here for a certain amount of time before anyone can make you go home. He showed me to my bed, which was a room that I shared with a few other people. And that started my journey with Oasis Center, was that night. And we wake up the next morning and I'm introduced to a counselor. And one of the first things that Oasis Center did was start talking to me about my education. They started asking all the right questions. How do you do on tests? How do you feel about this? How do you feel about that? And they said to me, I think there's a possibility you just learn differently. And the next day, she had contacted my school. She had gotten my finals, and they got me 2 individual tutors from Vanderbilt who sat with me every single day. She was showing me a different way for me to learn. And all of a sudden, I didn't feel inferior. The other thing that happened while I was there was the daily therapy. And their mindset is that we're not going to solve all of your problems. We've got to get you out of crisis, and we've got to make sure you're safe. And they do that with precision. You know, there was school every day, there was therapy every day, but there was other things too. I didn't realize that the first time I ever went hiking was with Oasis Center. And one of the things that we did almost every other day was we'd go up to Radnor Lake State Park. And I had no idea the calming and the impact that would have, frankly, on the rest of my life. And you know, I can't sit here and say that it was just a straight line up from the moment I got to Oasis Center to where I am today. It wasn't. And I found myself back on their doorsteps many times over the years, not for the shelter, but for regrounding. In so many ways, I just started to feel like this whole person. When I look back, Oasis Center has always been the turning point. I could have gone either way. And now I find myself looking back at a life that I'm incredibly proud of. I just know that I felt hopeless. And these people who didn't know me stood with me, gave me hope, and they asked for nothing in return. It saved my life in many ways, at many times, on many levels. And I will never be able to show them enough gratitude. But I do know this, I know that they are Nashville's only, to this day, only emergency shelter for teenagers. And they are a gift to this city. And if I can help people understand what a gift that they are, then I will have lived my life well.